Thank you all for joining us this morning on a bright early Tuesday morning for the next installment of our digital dash mini sessions. Today's session sounds relatively simple. Its sound file must have a text transcript, but for some agencies, this actually may pose to be a big problem, especially our larger agencies that post a lot of files. So we're going to go ahead and get started. As usual, the sessions today are being recorded, and we'll post these videos to our YouTube page within the Accessibility and Digital Dash playlist later on today. We do ask if you have any questions as we're going through this, because it's only 15 minutes long. Please post those questions into the Google chat, and we'll capture them all and then answer them this afternoon with some thoughtful answers. So with that, let's dive right into sound files must have a text transcript. This check, again, I said earlier, it's a relatively simple check. It aligns with the WCAG principle called perceivable. In other words, is the content perceivable to the end users? And it's straightforward. There has to be text alternatives for any non-text content. So anytime we're providing audio or video, we need to make sure we provide at least some type of text alternative for that content. And the reason is twofold. Obviously, for users who have hearing difficulties, if they can't hear the audio, they need the transcript to be able to get the information. But the transcripts are also very useful for screen readers and other assistive technologies, because it allows those screen readers to read the audio content and read it in a way that may be helpful for users with cognitive disabilities that aren't necessarily able to interpret or perceive the content as it's playing within the audio. So I wanted to start off just explaining what the check is looking for. And I put the technical definition up there, which is it looks at all hyperlinks on your website, and it's any of those hyperlinks and with one of those file extensions that are for an audio file format, then this review item is going to show up. It's not listening to the sound. It's simply looking to see, is there an audio file there? So it is pretty straightforward to find. This is a review item, which means it doesn't necessarily mean it's an error. It just means that the system identified an audio file and it wants you to look at it to determine if a transcript is indeed needed. And honestly, the only way to do this is going to be by using the optimized browser extension. We'll go through how to do it looking within the optimized tool, but it's much better to use the browser extension, look at the individual pages where these audio files are. The sound requires text, and if so, make sure that there's a transcript. A couple of kind of best practices when considering your transcripts. There are a lot of tools out there that are available to help you generate transcriptions, particularly of your older recordings, but you have to be careful with those. Any auto-generated tool, particularly now in the age of AI, needs to be proofread for accuracy. We need to make sure that everything is correct in the transcript of the file. Once you do have the transcript, you should put it right underneath the audio file or video file. And I do want to pause a minute. I'm saying both audio and video here. Transcripts are for audio files. Captions are for video files. There's a slight difference between both of those. But for the purposes of this session, we're really just talking audio files. And a transcript should be right next to or underneath on the same page as the audio file itself. And then, of course, once the audio file is there, go into the optimized tool or use the browser extension to mark the item as reviewed. And this time I want to reiterate, there's two different actions that we can take within Optimize. we can either mark something as reviewed or mark as fixed. They actually have different meanings within the optimized system. The reviewed option or ignore option tells the system that you've looked at it and that accessibility check is now passing, and optimize should no longer count it against your compliance score. It should be represented as passing. When we use the mark as fixed action item in optimize, we're telling the scanning tool that we took some kind of action and indicated, change code, change the way the website is, something like that, and that the scanner should stop reporting it as a problem and instead rescan the item during the next weekly scan. And when it scans it again, it's going to check to see if the problem is fixed. Well, this is a review item. And so a computer is never going to be able to know if that transcript is directly with the audio file. So even if you post a transcript afterwards, when you mark as fixed, the next week, this is going to continue to pop up. So after you posted the transcript to your page, make sure to check on the mark as reviewed option. Now, a lot of the folks, I saw Department of Revenue on board, DES, DEMA, a lot of our larger agencies are going to have a lot of sound files posted to their website. And so that can pose kind of a problem. How do you go and fix hundreds, if not thousands, of audio files and get transcripts there? So today I wanted to touch on a couple of strategies about how to approach the problem. We're going to cover reducing the scope, archiving content, look at a couple of the contracts, statewide contracts that are available to if you need to pay someone to help transcribe services. And then also for some agencies, you might be able to mark the entire check as ignored. And so we'll touch on that as well. But the first thing we should always look to do is reduce the scope of the problem that we have. We know that there are a ton of audio files out there on your websites. Not all of those may need to actually be on the websites, though. We do record all of our public meetings now. I believe it's been several years since the legislature passed a law requiring public meetings be recorded. Most audio or most public meetings are now in audio or video form, but that doesn't mean it necessarily has to be posted on your website. Now, I'm saying all of this, and there is a bill in the legislature that would require these meetings to be posted on your website. So, of course, every legislative session, this may change. But if those audio or video files are not required to be on your website, you might want to consider unpublishing those unnecessary files if they're not adding value. I also want to note there is a difference between public records laws versus what's on the website. So taking it off your website, you still have to comply with public records laws. Meeting minutes are permanent public records, so you have to have it, but that doesn't mean you necessarily have to have it publicly posted on your website. So consider that step first, is removing anything that's not adding value to your website. The next option that's out there, and I want to be very careful about this option, but it's to archive your content. And this is a strategy to avoid a DOJ enforcement action coming up in 2026. It's possible that you can archive these audio files and not require them to be accessible and not face enforcement action if they're not accessible. But in order for content to be considered archived and exempt from these requirements, there are very specific, all of these requirements have to be met. Obviously, anything before April 24th of 2026. That's the compliance date 2 years after the rule was posted. That's the compliance date for the state of Arizona. So any content posted before that date can be considered archived. It can only be retained for reference, research, or record keeping purposes. It can't be used to access or participate in any public services programs or activities. and it can't be altered or updated after it's been archived. And the final one, and this is the one where I think some agencies may have to consider their content strategies. If you are going to archive your content, it has to be in a dedicated area that's clearly identified as archive. So you can't commingle it with other non-archived content. So if you've got years and years worth of public meetings posted to your site, you can't have all of the non-accessible, quote, archive public meetings all mixed in with the regular public meetings that are required to be accessible. So there are some specifics on that. And most importantly, even though the DOJ is not going to bring the enforcement action if it's on your website, you still have to have an accessible version of that content if it's requested. So you're not really getting out of the accessibility, it's more just delaying the requirements for it. If you do have any questions, though, I posted the link and the resources for this chat in the chat here. And that FAQ there can provide a lot of great information. So there's a couple of statewide contracts you might want to consider if you have a ton of files. I think for a lot of people, if you've got, let's say, less than 50 files, you may just want to manually create the transcripts, or you might want to even look at some of the AI tools that are out there, speech to text tools that are out there. But for a large volume of files, you might want to consider looking at the various transcription contracts that are available at app.az.gov. That's the statewide procurement portal. You just click on the state contracts link. You don't need a username and password to use it and define state contracts. So there's two active contracts that can be useful for this purpose there. The other option, I'm going to switch over to Optimize to kind of show this and to talk about the check next, is to mark the check as ignored. I know some of our state websites will automatically require a transcript be posted with the audio file or video file when you post it. Your system won't allow you to upload an audio file without a transcript being attached. If that's the case for your system, then you can actually mark the entire check as ignored and not have to go through and review every single audio file individually. And the way we do this, I've already kind of logged into our accessibility dashboard. I've gone to my checklist, did a search for the word sound, and so I pulled up the second check here. The sound file must have the text transcript. These are level A, so they're all the relatively simple ones. If you click the action button, there is an ignore this check. And this button is going to tell the system to never report on sound file must have the text transcript again. This doesn't fix any accessibility problems. It simply doesn't report these as problems and you have a higher score. So you only want to choose this option if it's not possible for an audio file to be posted without a text transcript. But if you're like this website that only has 5 audio files on the site, it's best to just look at each directly. So we're going to click on our 5 pages, and this will show us all 5 pages on the website where an audio file might exist. Click on the meeting details or page details page off to the right here, and it will pull open that page. And just like all of our other checks, when it opens up this page, it's going to display all the different checks, but it's going to highlight the one we were just looking at. It will look at the code. And as I said, this isn't very useful to do these checks because it doesn't show the rest of the page. So I always like to look directly at the page, see if there's a transcript, and if there is, click mark as reviewed. So with that, sorry, I have to switch back. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of resources that are available, and I posted all of these in the chat. The W3C has some great resources that I would encourage you to read on transcribing text. There are different options. If you're recording new videos, use the transcript feature in Google Meet to create those. There's also tricks where you can take an audio file and re-record the audio using Google Meet to create the transcript. That's a little bit slower method than just paying a professional to use it. You can also use Gemini 1.5 Pro and generate the text transcript. There is fee associated with that though, so keep that in mind. It'll require the Gemini AI subscription. So with that, we are out of time, but I want to thank everybody for attending, and I'll be sticking around for a couple of minutes. So please, if you have any questions, post them into the Google chat so we can make sure to get you answers today. And we will see you later this week to discuss data tables and some changes going on with data tables in the accessibility space. Thank you all.